open tracker roller spring perches. These are going on the Mustang. Um, these are really neat, and I probably should have put them on in the first place. But I didn't follow my own rule. That's some people say buy once, cry once. Mine is there's never enough money to do it right the first time, but there's always enough money to do it right the second time. I prefer that one just because I don't know, it rolls off the tongue better. But anyways, these are roller spring perches, and you see how easily I can rotate them. You'll remember in the last video, and I'll put a link right there, when we did the suspension upgrade, that we put polyurethane bushings in the originals. The one on the passenger side has kind of been popping a little bit, and I thought, well, it's going to break in. And they were properly greased and everything. It's just doing it worse as time goes on. And so what's happening is, and we'll get a quick demonstration over here. Drew it in grease pencil. The way that the Mustangs are set up is kind of interesting. They have the lower control arm, the upper control arm. This is the spindle right here, and your ball joints would be right here. And then they've got the spring perch right here, and the spring sits in the shock tower. Of course, the shock goes through the spring. All the way to the car, just about, if we were to run the physics on this, there's a little bit of distribution that happens here, but most of the way to the car is on this spring. And the friction that is in the bushing, especially if the bushing's tight, like new bushings tend to be, will hold it up from rotating. And what happens is it pops, because all this is just like an earthquake, right? The pressure builds up until it overcomes the friction, and then boom, it pops, right? That's, for my California folks, that's what happens in an earthquake, and that's what happens here, right? It doesn't have smooth motion in that bushing. And the polyurethane is harder than rubber. And so the polyurethane itself doesn't really move. It's just that the pin rotates. It's supposed to rotate inside the polyurethane. It's not. It's too small of a diameter for the polyurethane, and there's too much friction there, and it doesn't roll nicely. So Open Tracker Racing makes these, and a lot of people have gone to these, and they're quite simply put ball bearings in here. I mean, it's a neat idea. It says patent pending. If I designed that, I would want to patent it too, if nobody had already. But, they obviously rotate a whole lot easier. So somebody else had recommended these before, and I was trying to kind of keep it stock. And anyways, it's fine. We're going to swap them out, which is kind of a pain in the ass, because now I got to compress the springs again. You take the shocks out, compress the springs, get them out. Although I'm told it's easier to get the new springs in with these because they rotate easier. Anyways, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to give these a shot. So I got one side done before I show you the whole process, and as usual, I do that in case I learn anything along the way. It's easier for me to explain it rather than me running into a problem and trying to figure it out and wait. So anyways, I'm going to show you the difference here. You'll remember these are the polyurethane ones, and this is the new roller, of course. And the new roller one I can pretty much move with one finger. This is the friction that I'm talking about with these. And let's see if I can do this one-handed. Watch it pop when I turn it. See? See how that's doing that? When it's under a bunch of load, when there's 500 or 800 pounds or whatever there is on this spring here, that's going to make a lot of noise. It's going to pop and bang, and not only is it annoying, and it was worse when it was cold, once it would warm up, it'd be okay. But when you're turning a corner, it'll do that. And all of a sudden it'll pop, and it can actually kind of throw you off when you're cornering. And I noticed that I'm always making references to LA, so it's kind of fun. Anybody that's familiar at all with LA, if you're going northbound, or it's north or westbound on the 101, because it goes north and west because LA, everything's screwed up, and you go to get on the 405 north, it's a clover leaf, right, that comes around. I got about halfway through that turn and it went pop, and it shoved me to the side, and it was all because this is hanging up. And I thought I broke something, actually. the way that it did it, and it just turns out that there's just too much friction in these darn things. So anyways, the passenger side's done. It was the worst one. The driver's side was a little bit more smooth, but not a lot. So we're going to show the process on the driver's side now. Just a quick reference, this is the passenger side that's installed now. So you take the shock out the way I did it. This is the Cliff Notes version in case you don't want to watch the whole thing. I just took the 3 nuts off of the carriage bolts here and just lifted this whole thing out as an assembly with the shock on. I didn't even unbolt the shock from because you got to get the spring compressor down in here. So you just lift that all right out after you get the 2 nuts off of the stud, the front and the rear, or the inside and outside rather. You pull the nut from either side, and then you just get your spring compressor in here like we did last time. Compress it, take the 2 nuts off, and pull the spring purchase out. It's not hard. So we'll go and we'll move over to the driver's side. You know, I almost got really excited there for a minute. Almost got through a job where I didn't need a hammer and a drift, but nope. Anyways, I pulled the rear nut off of the shock so far, and I've found that that's easier to get that one off with the suspension all the way down. You can get your socket back there. Now to get this one out, you're going to need to raise the suspension. Now, I've got my floor jack tied up as a 3rd point. I like doing that when I jack stuff up. I've got my floor jack over there, and I have my jack stands underneath, and I kind of support it on all 3 because 3 points are better. I don't like hanging all the weight off the front of the subframe like that, so I do that. So I tie that up that way, but I get my bottle jack, and put your bottle jack underneath the ball joint. You know, if it's got a Zerk fitting, you kind of got to offset it a little bit, but get it underneath here, and that way you can move your suspension up and down with your little bottle jack. This is just a cheap Harbor Freight guy, but I've had it for years, and it works really well. I don't trust my life to it, but it works really well for stuff like this. So now that I got the rear one off there, I'm just going to get my wrench in here with this raised up, because you won't be able to get it otherwise. Those big washers don't like to come out. You know, they don't, and it doesn't like to let you get your socket in here. So with it jacked up just a little bit, I can get my socket up in here. So I'm going to go ahead and back this off, and then we'll take the 3 nuts off the top mount, and we'll take the whole shock out. Okay, so the hardware is off, and you'll see I've got it lowered now. So now the shock's just floating in there. So now we just quite simply we'll come over here. Now I'm lazy, and I'm just going to use my electric ratchet. If you don't have one of those, they're a great investment. And I'm just going to buzz these 3 off here. Now these are carriage bolts underneath. They like to spin, so I'm going to throw just a little bit of penetrating oil. Even though they've already been off of here, that penetrating oil dries out. I'm going to throw just a little bit on here to make them zip right off. All right, the nuts are off, and we just simply lift this out as a whole unit. And that just makes it so much easier. Now you got to be careful, because when we compress the spring, these are going to want to fall out. So, you know, just monitor that, because you don't want to lose one. But now we got to drop the spring compressor in here. This is the hardest part. Getting the spring compressor in here and getting it situated is just a pain. They just don't. There's just not a lot of room in here. So, if you want to watch the details on doing this before, my other video about I think swapping control arms, I think it was that video. I explain how to do all this kind of detailed work. So let me get this compressed, and then I'll show you guys just swapping out the spring purchase real quick. And by the way, if I didn't mention this before, Alf's Mustang Garage on YouTube, he also explains how to compress the springs, and he does it on the bench, which is a good reference. So just wanted to mention that. So I've got it all compressed here. It's loose. Remember, we're not taking it out, so I'm not compressing it as much as I need to take it out, but I do need it enough where I can slip this out of here. And when the new perch is in here, it rotates easier, so I'll be able to get it in here easier than this one is going to come out. So 2 9/16 nuts. These are pressed in on this one. The bolts are pressed in. On the new ones, they're not, which actually works to your advantage a little bit, because it's easier to get the new one in here and drop them in. So I'm going to back those out, and we'll slip this perch out of here. The driver's side is out, and just as I suspected, this one is not as bad as the passenger side. I mean, I could tell by the way that it was driving and how it sounded, but this one I can move it. And once I get it moving, this one moves a little bit smoother. It's not binding up as bad, but it's still binding up. So we got it out. Of course, the spring just wants to fall right out this time, you know, whereas last time I had to take the skirts out and stuff to, you know, the covers in here to get it in and out. Of course, this one just wants to fall out, so that's just Murphy's Law. So let me go grab the other perch, and we'll slip it up in here and get it bolted down. So for whatever reason, this side has just kind of been trouble-free. The shock was kind of fighting me on the other side and everything, and this side just didn't. I got the spring compressor out. I just dropped the shock back in, put the 3 bolts, well, they're nuts, and the carriage bolts that are almost kind of studs. When I dropped the shock in, I got those all bolted down first and just lined this up, because it's easier if that thing's not floating around on top. So it's bolted down on top. Now I can just get this in, get the bushing in here, the washers, you know, the big flat washer, the lock washer, and the nuts. And that really is all there is to it. You know, this whole thing, you know, I don't know how long this video is going to be, but I think this whole thing maybe took me an hour and a half to do both sides. So it's nothing to stress over, and I think it's a big upgrade, and it'll help with the handling here. So let me get it all together. We'll get it back down on the ground, and then I'm gonna check the suspension, kind of push down, up and down on it, and see how it feels. Well, I can already tell a huge difference. No noise. It's way smoother. Way smoother. So, you know, we'll get it out on the road here and drive it, but I can tell that definitely fixed the problem. And as I understand it, these things help a lot with handling. So, let me get the wheel covers back on, and we'll take it out for a little drive. I figure we might as well do a cold start on this thing, since I haven't driven it for, let's see, 1, 2, 3, this would be 4 days I haven't started it. So it's not very long, and it's about 68, 70 degrees out right now. We don't get a whole lot of cold days here. But that's probably about as long as it's been, so it's dead cold right now. Let's see, I mean, I'm sure it'll fire right up, you know. I don't know why the CTS says it's 88 degrees, because it's not. You know, I'll even prove it to you guys. Let's just prove that this thing is cold, so I can prove the beauty of fuel injection. You know, my hand is on the manifold. You know, I mean, it's ice cold right now. So, anyways, I just wanted to prove that. And let's see, it should fire right up. It always does. And that's it. Lights right off every time. I suspect the coolant temperature, it's weird. The coolant temperature sensor never shows lower than like 70. And it was like 50 degrees the other morning, and I drove it to work, and it still showed 70. So I don't know if it caps or what, but the sun's been shining under the hood. Maybe it warmed up the block. It's possible. I mean, it's 70 degrees and the sun's shining directly on it, so I guess that's possible. But anyways, yeah, it fires right up. So we're going to drive it now and see how the suspension feels. Oh yeah, this thing's a million times better. No creaks, it steers easier, it glides over the bumps better. Totally worth the money. I mean, I can't even express how much better it feels, and I've only driven around the block, so, you know, goes to show you, spend the money on the good parts. And look at how it glides over these bumps now. It used to hit them and creak really hard. So, I mean, I can't even express how good these things are. It just glides right in here. Look at that. So, anyways, we'll go ahead and wrap this one up, and it's a quick one, and you've already kind of seen some of this work before, but anyways, so we'll see you guys next time.